And boom. The Nearpod code for today is, or for this morning session, is UHNGR. UHNGR. Okay, I got 10 of you in here. I'm still missing a few. All right, I think that's pretty much everyone. Thank you. So, inside of a computer, our main objectives here is going to be able to describe and identify key components inside a personal computer case. Also, we're going to be able to name the steps to safely open a computer and take it apart. And lastly, after we take Humpty Dumpty apart, we are going to be like the soldiers and put them back again. This afternoon, I do apologize. I also forgot to review always. I like to make sure we're all clear, although you guys should have this. Our calendar for today is the inside of the computer. We'll have review of teamwork, and this afternoon we're going to have a little lab that you guys are going to break into your team's activity for inside the computer at the end. Also, as always, please remember to log into Google Classroom, as you will be doing classwork at one point, and then you're going to need to be able to be there. And if this activities, there is an activity inside this session. Thank you. So we have Pablo next on my list here. I have a little cute little app that gives me a list. I like it now.
Okay, so the computer case, also called the cases, can be categorized as a tower case, which sits upright, a desktop case, which lies flat on the desktop, an all-in-one case, which is all-in-one computers, and a mobile case, which is a laptop and a tablet. What can be found on the case? We can find drives, CD, DVDs, and Blu-rays, ports, USBs, audio display and peripherals. You can find monitors in laptops and in all-in-one.
Thank you, thank you. Ahmad, can you tell me what would be an example of an all-in-one case? Have you ever seen an all-in-one case, Ahmad? Yeah, with a computer, that's what they call an all-in-one case or an all-in-one computer. Have you ever seen one before?
Smartphones?
Well, that would be more of a mobile unit. We're looking for an actual computer. I think you guys have seen those Macs, those beautiful.
I was gonna say I'm using one.
Beautiful screen, and all you do is just see the monitor.
Oh.
Is it just a monitor? Nowadays, because before it used to be a humongous box with the computer on the bottom, and then they like just welded it all together. It looked horrible. Now it's just one screen. No computer. You don't see this little thing here. It's just one all-in-one screen computer. It has everything in there, the computer and the monitor all in one. The hard drives, everything's inside that one unit. It's beautiful and horrible at the same time. Anybody can tell me why?
Overheats often and very hard to upgrade.
Exactly. Overheats, hard to upgrade because remember, like I said, it's an all-in-one. So you just bought yourself a very expensive iPad and or whatever other unit that you just bought. And the moment that, guess what, that screen goes bad, you just lost your computer. Like I said before, right? You're not going to take apart a printer. You're not going to take apart a screen. You're not going to, most likely, if you're lucky in some of these cases, they may send you a replacement screen, especially for laptops, because you're expected to, in some places, to take out the screen and just replace it. Not fix the screen, but just replace the actual unit itself. But in these type of all-in-one cases, you get more trouble than what it is even worth. And if you're like us, where we're in a technical field, we like to be able to take it apart, upgrade it, and put the latest and greatest stuff in there without having to go and buy a whole new computer. We would find out, obviously, upgrading is much cheaper than going and buying next year another computer. It doesn't make sense sometimes. Or even to repair it. Thank you. Thank you both. All right, the guts of a computer. So you can see it here. I'm pretty sure they showed it a little bit better in the thing. In the back is the power supply. Usually it has, you can see this little fan here. There's a fan back there, as I showed yesterday in the pictures. You have all of your power cords. We'll find out also what each color is. The book should have told you also, if you guys kind of read the inside of a thing. If not, when we get to the actual power supplies, then we'll get into details of that. You have the actual fan for the processor. This whole thing here, the square is the motherboard. And right here, always the processor has a fan. Anybody want to take a wild guess why the processor has a fan nowadays?
So it won't overheat the computer?
Exactly. It actually, does it push air to it or does it pull? Does anybody know that one?
It
Yes.
pulls.
Yeah, it pulls. Does anybody know why it has to pull instead of push?
Because the heatsink is transferring the heat and then it's pulling that air out and then to a fresh air. So it's kind of like conceding the temperature.
Agreed. But why not flip that fan and just throw and put a air conditioning unit, a mini air conditioning unit, just throw cold air straight out to the heat sink? Why wouldn't I want to do that? It's going to get it cooler. Why wouldn't I do it?
Could damage the components with that.
Exactly.
Extreme temperatures can severely infect the metal.
That's exactly the answer I'm looking for. The problem is that these chips are so hot that the moment that you even spray cold air in there, you will actually break it, the chip. So the heat sink that you see there, which is that big, humongous gray thing that's usually right under the fan, is meant to transfer or for it to take the heat that the chip actually has. Behind this heat sink is called a thermal paste. Once again, these things we're going to be reviewing in detail when we get there. But so you know, the thermal paste is in between the chip and it. Exactly because of that, because it thermally transfers the heat. The heat sink should never touch the chip. That's very important. The heat sink never touches the chip. The thermal paste is in between the chip and the actual heat sink. Because of the same problem, the heat sink might be very cold or gets a cold blast, and that's not going to help. We want to thermally just let the heat escape the chip, go into the heat sink while that fan pulls away the actual heat. Down over here, we can see where spots that we can actually put the bays of the drives. Usually you have your DVD here on the top. You can have floppy in the old days or your hard drives nowadays down here. Any questions in reference to the screen? Like I said, we're going to get into more details of everything else, but this would be what a case would look like when we take off the side. So we're looking at the side view of a computer. That's the front where the buttons are. That's the back where all the cables go. So here's your motherboard. The motherboard has different sections in here. As you can see, we have our south bridge over here, our north bridge over here, and we have our CPU. We must learn these things, and we will, again, every single component, we're gonna have a detailed, but I just kind of going high level real quick. So you have the north bridge and the south bridge. Anyone know who those are? Ever heard of those things? Those are wonderful things that they have come up with, because before
Chipsets.
they are chipsets. Do you know their functions for each chipset?
They are controllers, aren't they?
Yes, yes, that is correct. So before these two things came out and the microprocessor, math processor that's come out, it used to be that the CPU had to do everything. I mean, everything. He's the one that talked to every single little component through the motherboard, as we've stated before. Now, you could only imagine you are always, even in as a IT personnel, as I stated, and anywhere inside the computer field, be it network or a physical computer, doesn't matter where you are as good as your slowest link. So if you're as good as your slowest team member, you're as good as your slowest chipset, you're as good as your slowest PCI bus. So it doesn't matter if your CPU is, I don't know how many gigahertz, if you don't have the speed in the rest of the components, you're not gonna get it. So what happened was that they came up with the North Bridge and a South Bridge. Because USB and PCI slots and your serial bus, all these things that are slow and cannot communicate fast, they all go to the South Bridge. If you notice, the North Bridge, who is talking much faster, has a heat sink on top of it, while the South Bridge, who is talking much slower, does not. That's one quick way of noticing. The North Bridge is always the one that's closest to the CPU socket itself. Here's your CPU socket, this little yellow guy here. That's where the CPU goes. So why do they do that? Because now everything, including the new video cards, the old video cards, which are the PCI slot, they talk to the South Bridge. But the new ones over here, which is the AGP and the new types of memory and all this stuff, he's talking to the North Bridge. So the CPU, you could just draw like an imaginary line, go straight this way, and then it has another line going to the South Bridge. Everybody either talks to the South Bridge or to the North Bridge, and from there it comes to the CPU. Any questions here? Over here we have the 20-pin power connector that comes from the actual power supply. We'll get into that. The IDE slots over here, that's usually for your drives, all different types of drives, if it's SSD or hard drive or an optical drive, tape drive. Here goes your network cards, which are built in. So usually you have a face plate. Well, this is what it looks like when you take everything out. You have your USB connectors, your printer. You should be able to recognize these things, and on purpose, they make these colors. The easiest thing is to memorize the colors. At the same time, you must know the pinout. So, for instance here, this one here, just by looking at it, you should know that this is called a DB25. That's a DB15. One's a female and the other one's male. These are things that you will be learning in the future chapters, but just so that you know, they do color code it to make it much easier, which is the pink, the blue, and all those other colors. But you must know the pinout and recognize the pinout, be that whatever it is, when we get to those chapters. Here's another view of the actual motherboard with, again, can now someone here spot, if you could just tell me either quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Where is my north bridge? Julie. From what we just heard, where would my north bridge be, Julie?
The on the side.
This one, this side over here, this side over here, or down here, or down here. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Where do you think the north bridge is from what I just explained?
The left top side is the first quadrant.
This is the first quadrant. Yeah, the left top would be 1. The top right is 2. And bottom left is 3. And the bottom right is 4. So what do you think it is? Is it in 1? I'm sorry?
Is it in the first quadrant?
Well, yeah, right around here, right? Somewhere around here, depending, it's right close to between 3 and 4. But I would take anything, either 1 or 3, I would have taken. Because it's right in the smack in the middle. You're correct. This is the guy here, right? Because he's got that little heat sink on him. He's not the CPU, who's the humongous guy over here. But that guy there with the little heat sink, that should be your chipset of the North Bridge. Good. Thank you. So, any questions or doubts? So here we have the memory modules. Earlier we saw the actual memory slots here, blue. Here it is filled out. And the memory modules are basically look like that. They snap into place. You have the cooler again for the actual heat sink. Here's a slot where the power goes in. And what's wonderful about all components in computer is that just like anything else, it's all zeros and ones. And in this case, they always mark number 1. You always, when you're looking at the motherboard, you're looking for number 1. It is always marked, no matter what component it is. Number 1 is either marked with a little dot. If it's the CPU, it'll have a little dot. Some of the CPUs, instead of, although it's square itself, it'll have a side that's like a cutoff instead of being a perfect square, and with a dot next to that cutoff side, so that you know specifically that's where number 1 is. Even in the back of a computer here, as you can see, even in the back of the computer, the parallel ports and stuff like that, there is specifically a pin 1. They specifically force you to have it going in a certain way so that there's no doubts on which way it goes in. It doesn't accept it another way. Can I put a USB cable inside backwards? Am I allowed?
Depends on the generation.
Well, the old ones, obviously, yeah. But this one right here, like this blue one, the number 2 or 3, would it allow me to flip it around backwards? If you notice, there's specifically a little gap here, and while the top one is much closer. So if I try to put it upside down, it might kind of go in, but it's not going to work. The same thing here, as you can see, the HDMI port. We should be able to recognize these ports by the end of this course. All of these ports here will be on your test of 1001. You should be able to know which one at a glance by the colors. You see here, these are all your audio ones. You should be able to know which color is which, know which one's input, output, speakers. The other one's a fiber optic cable for sound.
Diego, sorry, can you go to the first slide really quick?
This one or this one?
That one.
Uh-huh.
Okay, just for a second. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. So processors. E, if you could help us with this one. You guys, your name? E. LG?
G? Yes.
Okay, there we
You
go.
want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Processors installed on motherboard determine system computing power. Type is determined by motherboard specification. There are two major processor manufacturers, Intel and AMD.
Thank you. So yeah, so the major people now is Intel and AMD. Sorry, give me a second here. So these guys are the ones that pretty much, if you guys know or are familiar with any processors, are the major guys that are out there, Intel and AMD. Intel's been holding the grasp of pretty much of everything. AMD is the cheaper chipset that's available for people. A lot of people like to buy AMD because, especially back in the days, you could always overclock them. In other words, you can force them to go faster than what the manufacturer actually says that it is. But with all these new motherboards out there and able to sense exactly what it is, sometimes some of these motherboards don't allow you to overclock. But I know back in the days we used to love it because we could actually lie to the BIOS and tell them that I had a faster processor than what it was. Even though it was recognizing it, we could actually manipulate the BIOS and push it to go faster. Obviously, that required much more cooling. Your heat sink had to be a very good heat sink, much bigger one, and you couldn't complain whenever you got it crashed because you were pushing much faster than what it was. All right, Justin, could you help us out here with these?
Of course.
Mhm.
Heat sinks, passive cooling, and fans. Heat sink secure over the processor with thermal compound paste. Passive cooling attaches to the motherboard using arms. Some are soldered onto the board and not removable. Case fans attach to the case through snapping on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Those are major passive types of cooling that we have. Lázaro, never mind. I just clicked and there's nothing here to talk about. Memory modules itself, as you can see, one major thing that they want to make you note here is, anybody want to tell me why, actually, Lázaro, see if you know, blue, black, blue, black. Why is it in blue, black, blue, black? Anybody? If Lázaro,
Different channels.
that is correct. Different channels. What does that mean exactly, different channels?
It's telling you what is paired with, because you can't just have one RAM and one channel. They don't function correctly.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Yes, exactly it. Because basically, if I go and buy a computer, it has, let's say, 4 gigs of memory. And then I decide, oh, I want to put an extra 16. And then I go and buy 16 and I put 16. Guess what's going to happen? It's only going to see 4. Because the first chipset that's here is 4, and the next one is not even in the same speed and or size. It will not add it to you. So what you could do is leave that one there, and then in the blue channel you could put your 16 gig module. Now your computer, when it's posting up, it'll recognize the first bank has 4 and the second bank has 16. Now you have a total of 20. So be very careful when you're installing memory. If it's not the exact same size and clock speed size and clock speed, it will not work. Okay, Carlos.
Random access memory installed on motherboard with locking clips. Type, speed, and size is determined by motherboard specifications. Attached to slot through a locking clip to avoid memory becoming unsated. Always keep on an anti-static bag when not inside computer. Never touch the board chip with fingers or magnetized screwdriver.
Yeah. Yeah, keep magnets away from the computer. It doesn't matter which part, what component, unless if you want to erase or damage something, that'll actually help you out. The magnets, since everything here is magnetized, especially on hard drives, the spinning hard drives, if you pass what they call a degausser on above this hard drive, it will damage the contents in there. Successfully, a lot of times, erase everything that's in there. Thank you, Carlos. All right, so another thing that they tell us here is also the anti-static bag, as I stated. Whenever you are dealing with anything that's inside the computer, it's gonna come with that anti-static bag. It's not just because it looks pretty, we must put it in there. You could only see the day that you damage a $100 chip or a $300 chip, and you gotta tell your boss that he's gotta buy a new one. He's not gonna like it after the second one, I assure you. Not because I know. Wasn't me. Hey, he never told me. What do you want me to do? Anyway, so he learned the hard way. I'll tell you that much, because I started off, I don't know if I told you guys, I started off actually just delivering computers back in the 80s. And then they just started teaching me inside there before I actually took formal classes or anything. I pretty much learned on my own the hard way. All right. So next person, Teresa, if you could help us here with the drive types. Wait. I can see your lips moving, but now go ahead, talk.
Okay. Optical drives, compact disc, digital video disc, Blu-ray disc, solid state drive, no mechanical parts, flash memory, hard disk drive, magnetic head, used to read and write, platters and mechanical parts.
Thank you. Levi, can you spot one there maybe that you've never heard of? Is there one there you're not really very familiar with? Or Teresa yourself? Is there one there that you?
I didn't really get the I don't think I've ever seen the solid state drive. I know about the optical drive and the hard disk drive one.
Thank you. Is there any other one that comes out, or does everybody agree? Maybe solid state drive kind of.
I've never seen that one.
To them, is that a weird one?
I've never seen platters.
Platters. That's what's inside the actual thing. We'll see that. Yeah, platters is a component within an actual hard drive. Platers, platters, plate. They're all depending how you want to look at it. Okay, so solid state drives, believe it or not, all of you have not physically seen it, but are very glad that they exist. Anybody want to take a guess where solid state drives are very commonly found in?
Isn't it
Laptops.
Androids? The Androids don't have the little flash memory card. Is that one of it?
That is correct. Your Android device, your iPad. How you think they're gonna fit a hard drive in here? You think they can fit a hard drive in here? They have solid state drives, and they have even nowadays even memory chips kind of drives that are available. So these solid state drives no longer have a spinning disk like your hard drive here, or a magnetic head that's made to be used to read and write. It's actually a actual memory chip per se inside, instead of a moving component. Like flash memory, as you can see here. No mechanical parts at all. Physically, it'll look more or less like this one, but it has no actual components spinning around.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What about like hybrid drives?
Good question. Yes, we would be covering that on that, but I do appreciate the question. So your hybrid drives are actually both SSD and HDD. They'll have a SSD portion of the drive so that it could fly with that portion, that you could create partition for that portion. And then for the long-term storage, it'll use the HDD portion of the drive to store the information. So for the day-to-day task of when you're running your applications or maybe your operating system, something like that, that's all on the SSD. And then your documents would be stored in the actual hard drive portion. So it's all one drive, but with both technologies inside of it. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Not a problem. So your expansion slots, as we saw in the picture earlier, which I'll gladly bring right back. As we saw, yeah. Diego, slow down, slow down. There we are. As we saw here, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's on the motherboard itself already. But us gamers and or other people sometimes don't have either sufficient slots and or do not like the video card. You don't like the audio card. You want the top line or some other type of device you want. So they have created on the motherboard slots, which they call expansion slots. You have your PCI, your AGPs, all different types of slots that you could just go and take off this faceplate that you see here, which is a metal faceplate in the back usually, and then take off the screw and basically insert the expansion card. You can now put this video card in. The reason I know right away this is a video card is one, from the experience of looking at the back of this, and two, right away, this guy right here gives it right away to me away. Anybody know what this is right here? From what we learned already?
GPU.
That is a CPU, yeah. That's a GPU or for the graphics processor itself. Some of these graphic processors even have their own memory. So they'll have their own CPU and memory because of these gamers do not want to wait for the bus. Everybody remember who the bus is? Who's the bus?
That's the motherboard delivering the code to the CPU, the processor,
Exactly.
and then the RAM is buffering it.
That is correct. So now that I have everything inside this card for the video card, I no longer need to go to the CPU to go and do certain things. Make sense? The refresh rate on your video gets much, much faster. And all these new technologies are no longer on the South Bridge. These new technologies and these fast ones like these cards, they're connected directly to the North Bridge.
Diego,
Mm-hmm.
I have an open case right now, just trying to follow along.
Okay.
These two slots down here would be expansion slots.
Yes, we're going to see them now here in the slide that I have open.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, so here's your different types of expansion slots. Good catch, Jordan. So you'll see them on, again, in computers, we are one of the laziest and most smartest people in the world. No lie. Because the best programmer that you'll find is the most laziest person you will find to do something, because he will find out the most creative way to actually do the task instead of actually doing physically the task itself. I myself as a lazy person, you can see right now. But all kidding aside, in computers, we love to color code things. You'll notice here, instead of me having to force my eye to look close to this thing, it's white, it's brown, and it's black. There's no guessing. My white guy is the PCI, and now PCI has been replaced with the PCIe ones. The PCI are the old slots who are on your South Bridge. I keep on saying these things because you need to know who they talk to. Since they're so slow, the graphics, the audio, USB, network, all those guys are in low bandwidth. They talk to the South Bridge so that they don't slow down the North Bridge components or the CPU. Here's the next card is the AGP. He's the brown guy. Usually those are for your video cards who obviously have more bandwidth utilization. So they'll be on your North Bridge. and they're much faster and better graphics than your old PCI. And like I stated a second ago, your new PCI slots are called PCIe's, and they're obviously on the North Bridge also, and they're much better than the AGP or PCI. They even have capabilities of 3D graphics. Thank you, Jordan. Any questions or doubts on these expansion slots? Okay, here's the big boy right here. Inside, can anybody tell me, Levi, can you tell me what is this card here? Can you recognize it?
This card right here. No, I'm not too sure.
I'll give you a hint. Look.
Oh, is it a graphics card?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay.
Another hint that should have gave it away was this humongous fat fan with a heat sink. It's got to be video. If it's got a processor on top of it, just remember that real quick. Also, another thing that will give it away is this blue and white port. The blue port, pretty much, I would say 99.9999999%. If it's blue and it is a DB15, as you can see, I already know the size is DB15 by looking at it. It's not that I went and counted it. 555 is the shape, is a DB connector. That's what they call the shape. These are all called DB type connectors. And it actually has 15 holes, and it's a female one. The male DB5 would be silver. That's a serial port compared to this one, which is a female. As you can see here, this one is a PCIe Express connector. It's got the long connector. And in here, I can't figure out what it is, can I? Unless if I know because of years of dealing with it, by looking at it, it's red. Where in the world does this go? I have no idea, right? Now, if I start noticing a pattern, it's not gonna let me put it in there. And if you notice, this guy here and this guy here are the ones with little latches. We just need to remember that PCIe is a black guy, and then the AGP is the brown one, while the old ones, the PCI regular ones, are the white guys. Thank you, Levi.
You're welcome.
Okay, the power supply itself, it basically converts our AC to DC. Anybody know what's the difference between AC or DC when we speak in electricity? Alexa.
I do not know.
Okay. Alexa. AC, I'm so sorry. AC is what they call alternating current. DC is direct current. One way to remember, direct current goes one way. It's direct, goes one way, while alternating current is sinking back and forth. And AC is the one that comes from the street, while DC is your batteries or something that is inside your computer. So this unit here basically converts AC into DC, and it changes to these different volts. These we need to know. It creates positive and negative 3.3 volts. It creates positive and negative 5, and it creates positive and negative 12. This is how it creates its ones and zeros inside the computer, is with this voltage. It also usually has a switch selector or an automatic switch selector, depending on which country you have. So in the back of the actual unit, you'll see a little switch, a little dip switch that's there so that you could be able to change from 110 to 220, the AC current. A lot of the times, as I stated, it will automatically have the switching, but be careful. The ones that were purchased that are manual, you don't want to go and connect. Obviously, it's not here in the United States, but you want to make sure you have that knowledge, because there is Latin American countries in Europe that if you deal with countries that are international, that will have the 220. So everything inside the computer is going to be in DC, not AC. Okay. Alexa, can you tell me out of here, I'll name them out in numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Which one is a CPU, 1 through 6?
Number 2.
It has a processor, yes. But overall, I'd say what? What you would say what it is from looking on the side of it. Anybody?
North.
Levi, you want to help her out from what we looked at a little bit a while ago? What was this that we looked at? Number 2 here.
The graphics card.
Yeah, it's a graphics card, correct. It has the little blue and white
White and
thing
blue
here,
ports.
and then it has a CPU. Thank you, Bo.
You're welcome.
Joseph, can you tell me from 1 through 6, which one is a CPU? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think he's absent. That's right. Sorry about that. Jordan, 1 through 6. Which one is a CPU?
Would it be 1?
That is correct. That is correct. We're going to be learning to recognize these components much better. And believe it or not, we would be learning that this one is a landing grid one. It doesn't have any of the spikes as the old Intel ones have. These are completely just touched. The spikes are actually on the motherboard instead of on the chip.
Okay.
Thank you, Jordan. Daniel, can you tell me what number 3 is, Daniel?
Power supply.
That is correct. And if you'll notice here, that little red dip switch that I was talking about a couple of seconds ago, that's the little dip switch that you can convert from 110 to 220, your AC.
There's different types of power supplies, right? Depending on their grades.
Depending on the grades, depending on the amount of load that you require inside. As for instance, this is a very simple one. It is not a gaming one. If people have seen gaming ones, this is like a joke to them.
I agree.
The gaming ones are basically, you won't even see cables. All you see is just this big black box with a whole bunch of holes, and they give you the cable separate so that you could actually decide how much cables you have or don't have inside the computer. Thank you, Daniel.
No problem.
Ahmad, can you tell me what number 4 is?
It's a fan.
Correct, a CPU fan or a
CPU fan.
or any other type of fan would be acceptable, but it's mainly used for CPUs, right? Let's see here. Christina. Can you tell me what number 5 is?
RAM.
Yeah, but what type of RAM? No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I don't know. But I don't know. You can tell me whatever you want. I got here. I can't tell. I can see it has 3 dips, but I can't tell you. All right. So this one here, number 6, Jordan.
It's a hard drive.
That is correct. It's a type of hard drive. Thank you all. So, Lazaro, if you could help us out with this one here.
All right.
Steps of taking a computer apart.
There are 4 steps to taking the computer apart. 1. Plan and organize your work. 2. Open case and examine the system. 3. Remove slot components. 4. Remove the main components. Don't forget, best practice when working inside a computer includes documentation. Before beginning any work on a computer, documentation starts from the initial conversation with the customer. Detailed notes regarding any issues or comments will be helpful when the repair begins and should continue throughout the process. You need to have a reason before opening the case.
Thank you. Now, can anybody tell me when we're planning and organizing the work, and before we open actual computer case, what should we be doing? Carlos, can you take a stab at that one? What should I be doing in my plan and organized work? I'm going to be documenting and stuff like that. But what?
I'm sorry, can you repeat yourself? I wrote in the chat that I was gone for a little bit.
Yeah, not a problem. Within the step number 1, when I'm planning and organizing work, what should I be doing? I know I'm documenting, maybe cleaning up the area, making sure that it's ready. I'm about to maybe, you know, as we said here, we're going to document and understand everything before we, but what's one thing that I don't see here? What's one thing missing out of here that I should be doing before I even open this computer or any computer?
Let's see.
Anybody want to take?
Well, I would, I guess, like take precautions, like opening it.
Yeah, but that would be during the actual step of 2, right? So that's where I'm gonna power it down and all that stuff. The computer's still on. I'm still documenting to the user and stuff. Before I turn it off, there's one more step I should do. Anybody want to take a wild guess?
Make sure it's discharged and you have protective.
Well, I'm still plugged in.
static.
There's not. Let's not go into step 2. We're going into step 2 there. Is before I do that. So I'm here with the user.
Talk to the customer.
I'm talking with the customer. I'm doing all that because I'm documenting. But there's one thing. I finished talking to him, and I kind of have an idea what it is. I have everything detailed. I have everything written. I'm about to turn it off. But before I turn it off, I should do something.
Anything about backing up?
Yes. Thank you, Julie. Exactly what I'm looking for. I should back up.
Makes sense.
Always, no matter what. Even if I'm gonna upgrade your computer, it doesn't matter what I'm gonna do. If I am touching your computer and you don't want the HR manager mad at you because you forgot to back up their computer. No, it wasn't me. You want to make sure that you do it. I'm only telling you, my face in shock when I forgot to, I was actually upgrading the person's computer and I thought their email was in the cloud. So I backed up and I forgot to back up their email. Yes. So they're 10 years of, so back up, all right? Make sure you back up the information. That is very important before we touch computers. Even though you might not be actually touching the hard drive, I can only give you an example. I went once into accounting. I went to go and fix somebody's computer. They called the help desk and said that the copier wasn't working and that I just happened to pass by and it's not working anymore. Like I told you, I was touching the guy's computer. I passed by I happened just to be walking by and I inherited, like if I was the one that actually broke the printer. So whenever we physically are doing stuff, we will make sure we document what we're doing and that there's no doubt and that we back up. So in step 1, thank you very much for that. Carlos, if you could help us with reading step 1.
Sure. Planning, organizing, stay organized with documentation and back up important data before opening the case. Work area should have enough space for keeping components free from ESD and not stacking. Take detailed notes regarding all aspects of the state of the computer, including setting benchmarking before repairs, upgrades, and maintenance. Draw a diagram of system placement or take pictures.
Thank you. Why would I want to draw a diagram of the system or take pictures, which my drawing we already know is stick figures. So why would I take a picture?
So you know what you changed, so if anything, you can put everything back.
Yeah, especially servers. If you're about to take apart a server or computer, when you take off the lid, unless if that type of model you already have it memorized, the first thing you want to do, even if you have it memorized, is take a picture. Why? Because you could prove that maybe if something was shorted out and you figured out it was that it wasn't you. Because the moment you opened it, you took a picture, it was like that. It's exactly how I found it. And when you're gonna put it all back again, for example, when I first started, I still remember I took out all the components because I was all excited and I was replacing the motherboard on a server. And how was it? The expansion slot was on. Oh, yeah. So that's what my face was because I didn't take a picture. I didn't do anything. And the server has a whole bunch of little extra components, expansion boards that go on top, even for memory, and all these complicated things. I didn't even put where the memory was. So one memory was one type, the other memory was another type. The screws, oh my God. So all those things I forgot to document where all the screws went. Some of the screws were different sizes. So take note, document. If you start taking things apart, take another picture of the next layer so you don't forget what goes where. Thank you. Levi, you can help us the next slide here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Step 1, plan and organize your work. Use safety precautions. ESD mat, gloves, and or bracelets should be readily accessible. Tie back loose hair and remove jewelry. Never reach into a computer that is on or connected to a power source. Discharge power by unplugging the computer cord, by unplugging the power cord and holding the power button for 5 seconds. Always hold motherboard components and the board itself by the edges to avoid injuries from sharp solders, as well as damage to the connectors. Never touch the board chips of the RAM or expansion cards, as oils on fingers can cause corrosion damage.
Thank you. Yeah, so pretend this is a memory chip and you had that little gold thing. So you want to hold the memory chips is on the sides like this. It's annoying, but you'll learn how to hold it with these two little fingers. If you hold it like this, where the gold is on the bottom, as I stated, now you have created a contact and bridged two connectors where they weren't supposed to. They're supposed to talk to the motherboard, not to each other. And you have static electricity. We all agreed that no matter what, we have some rate or voltage of static electricity on ourselves. So that current that's going through us is now going and being bridged between those two. Be whatever component, the same thing, the CPUs, your hard drives, it doesn't matter what it is. You want to make sure you grab it on the sides or at least make sure it's not you're not touching any of the gold. Easiest thing is just don't touch the gold. Thank you, Levi.
You're welcome.
Alexa, if you could help us with starting with step 2.
Step 2, open the computer case and examine the system. Power down the computer, unplug all external connections including the power cord. Press the power button for 3 to 5 seconds to discharge any residual electric in the power supply.
Yeah, thank you. The 3 to 5 seconds, I would lean more into the 5 to 10 second kind of little rule. And one way you can know is sometimes there's a little light in the front or the light on the network card is still on. Sometimes even the back of the fan, although you unplugged it, when you hit the button, you'll see that the fan starts spinning a little bit. I'm old school. I'm afraid of these little capacitors. You'll be surprised with the punch that they give. Obviously, there's much more modern equipment, but When you get shocked once, you don't play around with these things anymore. You always want to make sure you touch that. And when you're touching that, another trick is in the back, as I stated, the screw that's in the back of the power supply itself, at that same time, it's obviously, hopefully you're ready, like it says in step 1 here, power down and unplug the actual thing, right? You want to take out all the electricity. That would be your monitor cable, your network cable, your serial cables. All of that has electricity. Remember, although it is low voltage or a cable, the only way it talks is through electricity, and the rate of electricity is the 0 and 1. At all times, there is electricity running through your computer everywhere. So you need to be careful. You unplug every component, USB, everything. You hold it for 3 to 5 seconds, and you put your finger on that screw that's on the case, because you're going to discharge, and at the same time, you're grounding yourself to the case. Questions or doubts? Thank you, Alexa. Or from anybody in the group? Okay, Julie, if you could help us on the next part of step 2. Julie?
Step 2, open the computer
thank you.
case and examine the system. Open the case cover. Most have a side panel, while others open like a book. So hold the side panel. Some have screws, other clips. Few cases required to remove the front panel. Take note of any cable that may have a yellow triangle. This is the indicator for the positive lead, and the wire nearest the triangle in pin 1. Locate the major components first, including the power supply, motherboard, and drives. Then follow different connections.
Thank you. So yeah, so basically all manufacturers have their way of creating their cases. Some of them are as simple as a little latch. Some of them have screws, and some of them have these little weird fancy screws that actually have like a little plastic thing that you could, instead of having a screwdriver, you could just take it off. They all have their way of taking off their case in special ways, so you should always note which screws you should be taking off. You don't have to, a lot of the times, take off all of the screws. Sometimes you just need to take out 2 screws. You take off all the screws, you might even be taking off the screws for the power supply. So a lot of the times they kind of mark it, or you look at it and you'll see that there's like a little groove on the side that comes off. The other side, usually you won't take off, which is the side where the motherboard is. You would be taking off the side lid that's up opposite of the motherboard. How do we know? That's the side where the power is, and then down here you'll see all of the ports that we saw earlier. You're gonna see your video card, your USB ports. That's all gonna be close to the bottom of one of the sides. That's the side that you put to the bottom, and now we take off the 2 screws here and remove that top lid, because that's the one that's gonna allow you to grab what's inside. The other side does not give you any access to it. As you can see here, when you open it up, now that the guy is going and he's grabbing himself, and since he doesn't have a mat, he's using the chassis to ground himself, and he's documenting and taking pictures of where everything is. Because if you notice, these little 2 wires, if I take these all out, which are in groups of 2, I'm not gonna know which one was the yellow, which is blue, which is green, and which was red. Then I'm gonna have to start playing around with it and figuring out what's what. This is why we document and take pictures of everything, unless if we have it memorized and we know which one's the power on button, which one's the little speaker, which one's the power on, the little light indicator, and then I don't know what the other one is. But there's several buttons. Oh, and there's one that goes back to the actual, from the power button to back to the power supply, letting you know that somebody touched the actual power button. Any questions or doubts? A part of this step 2 here of open a case and examine and documenting. Another thing if we notice is that when we remove, we want to put them in a cups. The reason we want the cups, the little thing that we saw from our toolkit, is we want to keep those cups separate. The screws from outside usually are separate size. The ones that go on a motherboard may be different. than the ones that go on the chassis that it's on the expansion slots. So we want to keep those separate and not get confused on who's who. Thank you, Julie. Teresa, if you could help us with step 3.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now, yes.
Step 3, remove slot components, expansion cards. Start this step by removing all expansion cards. Some cards are connected to the case by a screw on the case opening. Unscrew this first before pulling. Be careful not to bend the cards back and forth. Rock end to end, pulling up. Store in the anti-static bag, being careful not to touch the board chip connection.
Thank you. So as you can see here, basically all he did is bring his little screwdriver to remove a screw that's here. Those are all the little metal face plates. He doesn't have anything in these expansion slots. He removed the old video card, the green card here, took it out. Then he basically, on the sides, if you notice, he's not touching anything except for the sides of this little waffle case. And then he pushes firmly on the sides. You want to kind of like rock it back and forth to be able to push it in. You'll feel it that it snaps in. On top of that, the little metal thing won't allow you, unless if you are the Hulk and decide to try to mash it in there, it will not allow you to go any further. The same thing with the actual expansion card itself. If you notice, it only has grooves with a certain space up to where you could actually push it. So you're not meant to force it too hard beyond the point. If you do, these little waffle cone things will break. Thank you very much, Teresa. Christina, if you could help us out here with RAM.
Step 3, remove slot components, RAM. Once you've located the RAM you want to remove, you should notice 2 tabs on either side of the memory slot. Press each tab down away from the memory slot. If done successfully, the memory should pop out. Once both tabs are away from the memory module, you can lift the memory out with no effort. Place the RAM on an ESB bag or mat, being careful not to stack them.
Okay, that was that's a typo from them. I don't think it's ESB. I think it's ESD. Does everybody agree with me? Unless if there's a new ESB bag, I'm not sure, but it's electric static. No, they made me forget what it is. But anyways, so thank you.
ESD.
Yeah, it is ESD, I know, but now they made me forget what the letter D stands for putting that B. Now I can't get the word out. Electric static discharge. There we go. Now I got it. So here on the sides, as she stated, are the little doohickeys or tabs themselves. So basically all you have to do is go onto the tab and just pull away from the unit. On the bottom of it, it has a little hammer. So down here, see where I'm pointing? When I push this, the little hammer that's under will actually push the memory out. If you do it correctly, it should just pop out. The same thing. When I'm going to place this RAM, I'm going to actually, again, on the sides, put it in because these 2 tabs will be completely open now. So the butterfly is completely open. When I push down in, and if you notice, you see this little slot here. Everybody see the little line? The little slot is the slot that you will see in the memory module itself. So if I try to put it in backwards, the memory won't go in because if you notice, it's right in the middle and then there's another one on the right. So the other one's got to be facing that way. If it doesn't want to go in, turn it around. Either that or you bought the wrong type of memory because every single memory and every component on purpose, they do this. They put the color different and they put the size different so that there's no doubts that that goes in there. So if you're trying to put the star inside the circle, stop. The star's not going to fit in the circle. Neither is the square. Everybody remember in kindergarten? Hopefully you do. The triangle fits in the circle, though. Try it out. All right, so next one. DeAndre, CPU, please.
CPU. Next, remove the
CPU. Do this by first removing the heatsink. Remove the heatsink by unclipping or unscrewing from the motherboard. Note, when unscrewing, use the X method. After removing the heatsink, lift the arm locking the CPU in place, then remove the CPU by grasping the edges and pulling straight up, being careful not to bend any pins that may be on the CPU. Document the status of the thermal compound on both the CPU and the heatsink. Dried out, missing, or too much. Clean and replace paste. Place the CPU in an anti-static bag.
Okay. So two things I would like to note there from the notes that they put in there. Thank you very much, DeAndre. When unscrewing, use the X method. I'm pretty sure a lot of the guys know this when they're changing the tires. If anybody's ever changed a tire, the first thing they teach you is the X method. Anybody know what that is? From changing a tire?
Yes.
Oh my God, guys. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I've had a lot of flat tires.
Okay, what's the X method?
It's basically you do one screw and then you do the one across from it, and then you go to the next one up top, and then you go back down to the other one across from that one.
That is correct. Thank you very much, Christina, showing the guys here. Now you guys know how to change a tire. Basically, the purpose of that is because the tire, or in this case, the CPU, if you try to put the screws in a circle format, you might have noticed sometimes if you have something, then the other side doesn't want to go in. So you need the X so that the seesaw action is going where it's pushing on this side and then it pushes on the opposite side. Now, like she said, you go back up to this side. I push that screw. Now I got to push the opposite side so that there is consistent pressure on both sides. If not, your tire will come off. Or in this case, your CPU will have some space between the heatsink in itself, and it won't be touching correctly. You're gonna start having issues with your CPU overheating. Thank you very much, Christina and DeAndre. Next, here is the dried out, missing, or too much. Basically, what they mean is, so I removed my heatsink, first the fan, obviously, then I removed my heatsink. If and only if that paste, when you look at it, you'll notice, I mean, if you want to touch it, I think it creates cancer. I'm not sure how that works out for you. But if you'll notice, just like toothpaste, that it's still like wet or that it smudges with it, right? When it's dry, you'll notice that when you take it off, you could tell it's like turned white and it's like dry paste. You'll be able to notice that. And if it has too much, the thermal heat will not, it's going to be wet, obviously, and it's going to be too much. And then the thermal paste will be basically blocking completely from transferring from the chip to the heat sink. So nor too little, nor too much, nor too dry. So just, what is it called? The Goldilocks zone, right? You want to make sure you have enough, and you'll learn exactly how much it is by experience. It's just usually a dab that you're putting in there, and then that creates the enough space between the heat sink and it, because remember, heat always rises, so no matter what, it will get to the heat sink. Not like if you're going to make a pizza here and you got to have sauce all over the paste on top of the chip. It's not that. All right? Questions? Doubts? Okay, Justin, help us out here with step 4.
Step 4, remove main components. Power supply, remove all power connections from the board, including all connections and components. Unscrew the power supply from the outside of the case after carefully noting which screws attach to the case and which will open the actual unit. Remove and set aside.
Thank you. So yeah, so remember, this is taking the computer completely apart. Not gonna something that we're gonna be doing every single time we open a computer, right, guys? It's just taking a computer completely apart. That these are the steps that we will be doing. Thank you, Justin. So, like I said earlier, as you see here, they're also saying to take note of what screws are what, because if you start taking off all the screws, okay, you took off all the screws, but you might not need to, and then stuff starts falling inside. Like sometimes there's an extra fan in here just for cooling purposes, and there's no need to take off all these screws. Some of them are actually screws that are for the peripherals. So if you take those off, then the peripherals start falling inside, which makes no, just make sure we only take out what you need. Next, we have here Daniel, step 4.
All board connectors and drives. Unplug front panel connections after noting the configuration. Remove any system fans. Next is to unplug all connectors from the components to the board. This includes SATA, PATA, IDE, and removing all the drives according to see how they are attached. Most are clipped and while others have screws, and setting aside noting how they were removed and their connection to the board.
Mm-hmm. And once again, if you don't want to write these things down, you got your little trusty little phone usually with you. Just take a picture of it. Take a picture of it. You'll see here that also the majority of these little plugs, they'll say reset switch, speaker, as I was saying earlier, power, indicator, and stuff like that. You could just take it all off and not note anything, but just get yourself handy una lupita, a magnifying glass, so that you could be able to read the board, because the board will have this, but in very small little letters. So you're gonna have to zoom in to figure it out. Second, if you go and connect these things backwards, so now I have a SATA and maybe an IDE or a PATA drive, a PATA IDE cable. If I don't note the way in the order that it was connected to the motherboard, can anybody tell me what's gonna happen in my post? Take a wild guess from what we learned in the post. What's the BIOS doing in the post process when I turn it back on?
Just checking all the hardware.
And that if it's still the same, right?
Yeah.
So it's got the CMOS storage of the information, right? So the BIOS goes to the CMOS storage module and says, hey, all right, what was it that I had here? Well, this is all the stuff. All right, let me go check them out. So guess what happens? If you flip-flop it, if your operating system was in the first one, sometimes, not always, but in some, especially in virtual environments, you may lose the whole thing. So you got to be careful in virtual environments when you're creating virtual computers. If you flip-flop the order of these drives, you may damage the whole virtual computer, and then it's not even going to boot up anymore. So, and the same thing's going to happen to you in this case. But what's good about this is that most likely if you disconnect it and start playing around with the drives and trying to figure out which one was which, it'll come back up. But for that, just take a picture or take note of how each and every individual component is connected in here. It's much easier. Unless if you like puzzles. If you like puzzles and you want to get fired by the first week because your performance is so slow and because people are complaining that things aren't working like they were, then it's up to you. Always document, document, document. You'll hear that like a million times. So here we are, motherboard. Pablo. I'm sorry, we can't hear you, Pablo.
Okay, so remove main components, the motherboard. After all components, connections, and cables have been detached from the board, including all components being removed, it's time to remove the motherboard. Locate all the riser screws. Most motherboards have 6 to 8 screws. Using the X method as to not put any pressure on the one side or the other, start unscrewing systematically.
Thank you. So again, as you notice, the X method is still going on here when you're taking off things. If you'll notice though too, here you'll notice that these screws have a special indicator right below them. You see it? See how it's like silver little round hole? These are the ones that you know for sure are for specifically removing the motherboard. There might be some other screws that you'll find there that are for riser cards or for other things on a motherboard, depending the type of motherboard you're dealing with. The ones you're going to be looking for are for these guys, which are the main ones. They're usually there. So you might just want to take out the motherboard, or you just might want to just take off the riser card. You're going to look for the specific screws that you're looking for. And always, as Christina taught us, use the X method by one side to the other so that we can be able to start unscrewing it or screwing it back in. Thank you, Pablo. LG, if you could help us out here with motherboard continued. LG? There you go. You're unmuted now. Go ahead. Can you read us step 4, LG?
Sorry, I had my headphones on and I forgot they don't work.
Oh, okay.
Carefully lift the board, carefully holding edges. Place board inside an anti-static bag.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Can somebody take a wild guess what he's wearing in his hands?
Gloves, anti-static gloves.
Yeah, if you notice, he's not wearing a bracelet. He's actually just wearing the anti-static gloves. I like these gloves more than the bracelet because if you notice, if I have the bracelet on, I'm chained to the machine. I always called it a chain. And then it's annoying because now when I go like this and I'm going to turn around, which one day you're going to do it. You're laughing at me now, which already happened to me. But one day, since I was chained to it, I went like this, I turned around, and guess what happened to the case and everything that was with me? It fell to the floor because as soon as I pull away to go and place it on the shelf, since it was chained to me and it was connected to the computer, it actually yanked the whole case and the case fell down to the floor. So these anti-static gloves I prefer because 1, you're being safe, and 2, you're not limiting yourself to the case or to the mat because sometimes people connect themselves to the mat. And again, you have that annoying thing where you're getting yanked back onto the mat. Thank you, LG. Okay, Joseph. That's right. Jesus, I don't know. I keep on doing that to myself. I must like calling out Joseph. Sorry about that, guy. All right, Julie. Could you help us out here?
All right, 10 steps to putting the computer back together.
Sorry to interrupt you, Julie. I'm so sorry. Let's pause here, guys. I just noticed what time it is. Let's take our 15-minute break. I do apologize, Julie, but I'll give it right back to you when we get back. If at any point you guys see that at 10:15 rolls along and I still haven't given. So in our classwork for this session, I uploaded a document. We're going to be going through these steps here. I think it was Julie that I unfortunately.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Julie. If you could help us out, this is the spot that we left off.
Okay, 10 steps of working in the reverse order and following the documentation or notes or images or diagrams put the computer back together. 1, place motherboard back inside, carefully aligning the holes in the board with the riser holes.
Great. If you notice again, here goes the holes on the actual case. This is the motherboard out of place. Here's the case. Here's that circle that I told you that was marked. Those are the important circles because there may be other screws, like I told you, on the board that you shouldn't be taking off. The only ones that are marked for you are the ones that align to the actual case. That's the lid on the other side that I said earlier that you shouldn't be taking off. Back there is the actual other black lid, right? So you align them carefully and then you put the screws back in. Thank you, Julie. Thank you. All right. Next we have Carlos.
All drives and fans go back in their housing. Connect all cables to board. Attach power supply back into place, making all connections including board and components.
Thank you. You'll notice also here, you see how this is a rectangle? Also, well, you can't really see it, but if we'll get into it later. These are actually different shapes. Some of them are like a hexagon kind of weird shape on the tip. The other ones are more rectangular shape in form. Thank you, Carlos. Levi, or Levi, sorry. Levi. DeAndre, can you help us with this one?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
10 steps of putting the computer back together. Number 5, place CPU back using ZIF, zero insertion force, locking it back into place. If thermal paste is needed, add a small amount before attaching the heatsink. Circumference of the eraser on a pencil. Number 6, insert RAM being short to locate the notch in the slot. Insert straight down until the clip snaps to secure. Number 7, insert all expansion cards connecting as documented. Please cover back on according to remove the process. Number 9, attach all external connectors, including monitor, keyboard, mouse, USB connectors, and the power cord. Number 10, start the computer by pressing the power button. Listen for any unusual noise, smell, or activity, and document any errors.
Thank you very much. So basically, as we can see, that's putting Humpty Dumpty back again, the exact same order that we did to take it apart. Now we're just gonna use that in the inverse. So I'm gonna be, again, asking for, let me pause it here for a second.